I'm delighted to be sharing some thoughts with you on ethical AI and consumer protection. I'm going to start by setting out some brief context in terms of the importance of this issue. And I specifically want to address the role that business can play in resolving the challenges that are introduced by the implementation of artificial intelligence, or AI. My background is in the insurance industry, and while I speak from this perspective predominantly, these ideas can be extended to other industries which serve consumers. AI is utilized in everyday interactions, and personalized product recommendations for online shopping is a common example. We exist in a world where technology is rapidly advancing, and data is a growing and valuable resource for business and society. I came across an interesting exercise conducted by the Ottawa Citizen to illustrate the amount of data that has been collected on average Canadians by Facebook, Google, and Twitter. They used publicly available tools to download the records of one of their senior editors who volunteered for the experiment. As it happens, anyone can replicate this exercise with their own data, and one can run a Google search for assistance on how to do this. The amount of data downloaded came to more than 1.66 gigabytes. Now, the average size of a Kindle ebook is about 2.6 megabytes. So we're talking about a data file of more than 600 times that size. They say that the downloaded files included the editor's Facebook status updates, his message history, photos, tweets, and a catalog of his Google searches. So if we consider the privacy concerns surrounding this data and add AI into the mix, the scale of the issue compounds. Many search algorithms and recommendation engines are powered by AI, and its uses continue to evolve in ways that can undermine consumer privacy interests. It's clear that ethical application of AI will be an important pillar of consumer protection. The issue of ethics is, of course, broader than the use of AI specifically, and we'll be familiar with the many privacy scandals that have made headlines in recent years, including Cambridge Analytica and Facebook. Many codes, principles, policies, and frameworks have been written on ethical AI usage, but nonetheless, there remains a debate about what constitutes ethical applications of AI and which of the many standards should be met. Some key themes include transparency, equity, and privacy. So let me briefly introduce each of these and then suggest ways that businesses might play their part in the consumer protection mission. Transparency is about the way that AI can be explained to customers and to employees. And that might sound simple on the face of it, until you consider the potential knowledge asymmetries. There's also the issue of proportionality in terms of the importance of the roles played by the different algorithms. So for example, a tool that enhances a shopping experience is very different from one that employs facial recognition tools in airports, for example, for the safety of travelers. Transparency involves explainability in terms of understanding why particular decisions are made. And there is, of course, a trade-off relating to the protection of intellectual property. In terms of equity, here I'm referring to the need to take care not to build biases of the past into decision-making algorithms. There is the potential for algorithms to produce unlawful or unintended discrimination in decision-making. For example, a few years ago, we learned of Amazon scrapping its AI recruiting tool, which showed bias against women. So the models themselves cannot detect bias in data sets, and they will require human intervention and judgment so that this bias isn't replicated and further embedded. And this is true even if the bias is not explicit in the model's variables. Care also needs to be taken to consider the purpose for which the data is used versus the purpose for which it was collected. And unfortunately, models may need to first be operationalized before we discover their flaws. And then privacy is about how organizations collect and process user data, and specifically the extent of users' knowledge or consent in relation to this data. We will no doubt be familiar with the privacy infringement laws that are being rolled out in our various parts of the world. So responsibility in an AI context for me is really about how all the key issues and challenges surrounding AI can be proactively managed with the aim of consumer protection. And it's here that I want to focus on solution finding. We can see regulation of AI uses as one way to protect consumers and society. And we can also place the onus of accountability on business. And I'll talk about some possible ways to do this. It's unlikely that formalized supervisory regimes can keep pace with this rapid advance of technology and, of course, its evolving uses. And therefore, I believe that a healthy dose of self-regulation is needed. So I'll describe 5 ways that consumer-facing organizations can move this agenda forward. The first is to create internal frameworks that outline a company's data stewardship commitments. So that could include concepts such as fairness or guidance around the use of personal information. And privacy laws have gone some way to providing a legal backdrop for this work. There is a wealth of information and resources available to support ethical implementation of AI and, of course, the policy frameworks. And business leadership requires an understanding of their AI strategies and how decisions are being made in line with their fiduciary responsibilities, and not least to mitigate against the potential for reputational damage. Secondly, thought needs to be given to the issue of data and model transparency. Now, this is not a simple task when one considers trying to simplify complex decision-making algorithms, or indeed honoring individuals' right to access vast amounts of information that relates to them. So, for example, the EU's General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, talks about automated decisions with legal effects or similarly significant effects. For example, when we talk about employment credit or insurance coverage, requiring that the person affected has recourse to a human who can review the decision and explain its logic. And the implications here are quite far-reaching. Thirdly, an education process is required both within the organization and for the benefits of its stakeholders. This poses a challenge and indeed an opportunity to simplify a complex area of practice. And of course, to keep this knowledge relevant as the landscape shifts. Fourth, AI is an area of development that requires dedicated risk management efforts and investment. For example, analyzing the impact that a decision can have on the persons for whom it's used. And additionally, understanding and mitigating against the potential biases in data as well as in the model design. I mentioned proportionality earlier, and therefore the interventions will need to be appropriate to the materiality of the decisions being made and indeed the impact of those decisions. And lastly, companies should invite independent or third-party review of their practices. Not only does this give consumers confidence that their interests are well considered, it should also provide organizations with the means of benchmarking their approaches and, of course, providing room for improvement. No doubt, mistakes will be made, so there will be need to take accountability for missteps and to be proactive about their remediation. So in conclusion, while there are many potential complexities to the ethical use of AI, these developments also offer an invitation for business to do so in an inclusive and a secure way for consumers. The way forward is likely to involve broad collaboration between businesses, regulators, consumer advocates, governments, and other stakeholders. And I look forward to seeing how this important debate continues to unfold. Thank you.